Hello and welcome to the OP Overwatch Podcast. I'm your host Jam and I'm joined by my co-host Jeff. How you doing, man?
What's up, man? I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Just kind of recovering off of the reeling news of the new character reveal, Ana, which we talked about in our last episode. And I'm really excited to get to our next two characters for this week's character breakdown.
Yep, let's jump right into it, man. I'm ready to go.
So the very first character that we're going to start with today is going to be Pharah.
Rocket jump? That sounds dangerous.
So Fariha Amari is a member of Overwatch. She's the daughter of Ana Amari and is also known as Pharah. This character is pretty cool. She actually is the quintessential rocket launcher character in Overwatch. She uses a jetpack to kind of fly around the level, and her predominant weapon is a rocket launcher. And she is in the attack class of the Overwatch roles.
Yeah, Pharah's really cool. She's definitely one of the stronger attack characters in the game, I think. Generally, she can be somewhat limited on certain maps, so map selection is relevant when you're thinking about choosing Pharah, but at worst, she's still a solid choice. Even if you're, the last checkpoint on Route 66 and that you can't fly upward, she's still putting out a ton of damage. But if you can maximize the map with her mobility and really find somewhere where there's not going to be a ceiling pinning you in, then you can really go nuts with her.
Yeah, absolutely. Pharah's definitely going to be utilized best in very open maps when you're outdoors or have high ceilings, like you mentioned, Route 66, Nepal, places where she has some room to move. She can use it in both an offensive and evasive capability. And she is very interesting as a character. Actually, so a little background on her. Much like Soldier 76, Blizzard knew that they wanted a character like this in the game very, very early in development. They actually had a early concept for a character just called Rocket Dude, and it was just going to be a guy that used a rocket launcher. So this was kind of an example of them starting with the concept and the mechanics of a character and kind of building it up into a fully fleshed out character with a full story and abilities. Pharah is definitely a powerhouse if used correctly. You'd expect that because she has a rocket launcher, but it's a little more complex than that. It's not just a matter of pointing in a general direction and shooting their rockets. So we'll start out with just her basic mobile abilities. She actually has a rocket jump and a hover. And this is something that she can use to kind of get around, as we mentioned before. It's an awesome evasive move. It's really, really fast, and you can attack simultaneously while you're using it. So, mid-jump, as you're moving up, you can shoot rockets at people. And it's really good for instantly reaching sniping points, covering unreachable areas of some maps by certain characters, use them to get away and to get in a position where you can attack someone without them being able to hit you back, or if they could hit you back, making it difficult for them.
Yeah, the flight is a big deal. You have to be kind of careful. It's usually better to be airborne, but there are some characters that are going to be looking for you there, and there's nothing to hide behind when you're up in the middle of the sky. So depending on the map and the opposing team comp, it can be a liability at times where you want to pick your spots and only go airborne when you're ready to ult or ready to attack the person that is looking to counter you. But other times, if you play against a team comp where everyone's grounded, you can stay airborne most of the time and just rain down on them. It's fantastic. So you got to be careful and be aware of who you're playing against. And then you mentioned the hover. It's a really neat mechanic where you just hold down her jump button and lets her stay airborne longer. You can almost stay even from, if you jump and then hover, and if you just tap it, it'll last longer. And then it's almost ready for her jump to come back off cooldown by the time you run out of hover bar. So you can stay airborne quite a while by using those two in combination.
Yeah, so the hover runs on fuel that does recharge quickly. So whenever you actually let go of that jump button, it will start recharging. But you cannot stay hovering forever. There is a limit to it. So really, it's all about management of your fuel and your cooldowns on your jump jet to really get the best out of Pharah as far as being in the air. The other thing is spatial awareness is key with Pharah, especially when moving forward or backward. You can hit that jump jet and you can, hover around. But the jump jet's really going to give you very, very quick upward vertical mobility. So actually, she doesn't move any quicker when she's going forward or backwards. So it's really about timing. If you want to land on a certain ledge and it's kind of out in the distance, you really want to be aware of how much a distance she can get with her hovering in conjunction with her jump jet as well. And then in actual battle, staying in the air with Pharah is really, really beneficial against close-range characters, people like Reaper or Roadhog or Reinhardt, because it gets you out of range. However, it does leave you very, very susceptible to sniper fire. So, if you're fighting a Hanzo or a Widowmaker, or more recently Anna, you're going to be almost a sitting duck against those snipers if you're not constantly moving side to side. And even then, it's going to be kind of hard to get away from them. So it's a good idea to mix between ground and air and not spend too much time in one of them.
That's definitely true. So we talked about her rockets a little bit, but there are some important mechanics we should note. So with the rockets, they do 120 direct damage if you just launch it right into someone, or 80 splash damage if you get near them. There's no headshots, so that's just the base damage, but it's really important to try and get the hang of these because there is a noticeable travel time, and landing direct damage and direct shots with these rockets is really the key to going from a decent Pharah to a really good or dominant Pharah. Being able to take people out in 2 hits is really a big deal. And when you get into Pharah versus Pharah duels, you're both going to be airborne most of the time. So you've got to land direct hits or you're not going to hit them at all because there's no splash damage when you're in the air.
Yeah, that 120 damage on that direct hit is definitely not an easy one to get if you're not used to Pharah's mechanics on her rocket launcher, but it is something to definitely strike for. You could shoot at the ground and just go for the 80 splash damage, but it's going to take a lot longer to take people out, and Pharah only has 200 hit points, so if you're trading hits with most of the characters in the game, she's not going to last very long. She also doesn't have any shields in her health pool, so there's no easy, quick recharge. If you don't have a healer nearby or watching out for those med packs, then you're pretty much going to be screwed once you hit the end of your HP. So you want to make your best defense your offense, and that rocket launcher is going to be your best bet. Tracking is really the key, and what I mean by that is you want to watch your opponent, and the rockets have travel time, and the farther away you are, obviously, the longer they're going to take to travel. So you want to make sure that you're shooting a little bit ahead of where your opponents are moving, if they are moving. Obviously, if they're standing still, some not so good snipers will just stay in one spot, and that's the best thing for Pharah because you just literally point and shoot and wait a few seconds, and bam, you're nailing them with direct hits over and over again. But you want to make sure that you're tracking your enemies, that you're kind of predicting where they're going to be, and that's definitely going to take some practice. You want to be aware of your ammo as well. Reloading does take a second, but a second can be forever when you're getting shot at by 2 or 3 characters and you're on your cooldown for your jump jet, so that's something you want to be aware of as well. And then also very important to note, especially if you're going for that splash damage in close quarters, that you can damage yourself up to 40 points of self-damage with your rocket launcher. So if you are shooting close range, try to keep it away from yourself because that's going to be probably the worst way to go.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's good to know that. Although sometimes I feel like taking myself down, shooting at like a Winston who's right in my face is better than letting Winston get the kill.
Yeah, and especially with someone like Winston, you're going to be able to get direct hits pretty easily when he's up in your face like he likes to be. So sometimes it's worth the self-sacrifice. Her next ability is her Concussion Blast, which this is a very interesting move because it actually is not really a move that you're trying to do damage with. It does... I'm reading different things here. It either does no damage or 1 damage. Not really a big difference either way, because you're not using it for damage. What you're using it is to relocate your enemies and yourself. So the Concussion Blast basically is a pushback type move. You can use it to basically shoot an area. It has a splash damage, and then everything from the point of contact with the move outward gets pushed away, including Pharah herself and your enemies. So really the key with this move is to use it to separate the enemy team and kind of get their healers away, or maybe move a pesky Reinhardt so he's not putting shields up on turrets or Bastion. It's a really, really cool move for one that doesn't even really do any damage.
Yeah, the Concussive Blast is a really cool ability. It's similar to Junkrat's Concussion Mine. I imagine that Blizzard is really proud of this ability and the depth of it. I mean, as you mentioned, it doesn't really do any damage, but the utility of it is very high. I mean, you can use it for so many different things. To separate a tank from their team or knock opponents off the map. You always see that with the highlights. But, I mean, you can also use it to save yourself. It'll push you away from someone's ultimate or get you to safety. So just because there's so many different ways to use it, there's not, some moves it's very obvious. They do one thing. But this, it's really, you can get really creative with.
Yeah, don't underestimate the power of knockback attacks in Overwatch. Even with characters that don't do a lot of damage, off the bat, if you can knock someone off a level, and there are plenty of maps that do have a control point, or maybe the payload passes by somewhere where there's just a cliff or the edge of the level, and that's something that you want to utilize if you can get the chance. Some people hang a little too close to that edge. Specifically in Ilios, I've noticed there's definitely a bunch of points where you can get knocked off a level. So places like that is like a playground for Pharah, because not only can you do that, but you can kind of play around those areas because you have the ability to fly out of there and get to safety. So Concussive Blast is a great tool to utilize for pushing off, and also, like Jeff mentioned, is to get away from people. Your close range fighters like your Reaper, Roadhog, a Tracer, you shoot right at the ground as they're chasing you down. Even though you don't have a lot of quick mobility horizontally, you can use that to push them away while simultaneously pushing yourself away. And that is a great way to kind of shake up their rhythm and, get away and maybe find a health pack or a healer. So that's really all of her main abilities. She just has her rocket launcher and the Concussive Blast, and then her flying around. And that brings us to her ultimate, which is the Barrage. And the Barrage is an amazing ability. It's probably one of the more iconic ones in Overwatch because she screams "Justice reigns from above" as she's using it. It's honestly probably one of the most powerful ultimates in the game, but it's hard to land every hit. So what she does is she stops in midair, and then she pretty much opens up her rocket suit and just starts launching tons of rockets towards wherever you're pointing. It's a salvo of mini rockets, and they do 40 damage per rocket to a total of about 2,500 damage if all rockets connect. Now, that's where the asterisk is, the big if. You're probably not, actually, you're most likely not going to land every single rocket because they are flying everywhere. However, 2,500 damage is a lot of damage to be dealing with. And if you're anywhere in the vicinity of that move, you are going to go down unless you handle it a certain way.
Pharah's ultimate is absolutely one of the most deadly and probably one of the most iconic in the game. It's all splash damage, so you could definitely get a full team kill. I mean, you're right, the damage is off the charts, but you're never going to land all of those rockets. So don't get hung up on the number, but the fact is that it's all splash damage, and so if you can just get a team grouped up, you can wipe them out. I don't care if it did, 50,000 or just enough. But yeah, it's fantastic. It really is effective when you use it to sync with, it pairs great with Zarya or Mei or Reinhardt. Same idea, not quite as good as Zarya, but it's going to hold everyone still. So definitely one that you want to coordinate with your team, and if you have anyone that can help you out, you want to let them know. One thing I would mention, though, Pharah is absolutely a sitting duck while using this. So, as you mentioned, she yells out, "Justice reigns from above," and she can't move. And so everyone's going to know to look up, and anyone who's not dying in it is just going to fire at you immediately. So you usually want to try and be kind of sneaky when you're ready to use it. Let teammates know if anyone like Zarya can shield you, or Mercy can go up and heal with you. But try and be sneaky and, not just be hovering above them. They're all firing at you, and then you use it, because you're going to be real easy to hit when you stop moving. But if they're looking in one direction and you just fly it from the side and ult, you're probably going to get them before they can turn and return fire.
Yeah, Jeff's completely right about this, guys. Either flanking or catching your enemies by surprise is going to be key for this ultimate, because it's probably single-handedly the most interrupted ultimate ever. I'd probably say maybe 7 to 8 times out of 10 when I see somebody using this ultimate with Pharah, she goes down. She might kill 1 or 2 and take someone with her, but very rarely, especially with some of the better players out there, will she survive the encounter. So catching someone off guard is really key. I highly recommend using it in the air. That's going to give you the best chance of being able to hit everyone that you want to. It can be aimed as it happens, so you don't have to lock onto one area and that's it. That's the only place you can shoot it. The entire duration of the 3 seconds that barrage is happening, you can point wherever you want, but you're going to be stuck where you are. So whether you're on the ground, in the air, you can't move. All you can do is aim. So it's important to get good position. It's also important to coordinate with other team members, as Jeff said, that Zarya is really, really good for ultimates, but also Zarya can actually be a great partner by dropping a shield on Pharah while she's using it, because that is a 2-second shield. So my recommendation, if you can coordinate well enough with another teammate, is to pop the ult, start the barrage, and maybe a second in, once people start to realize what's going on, maybe get your Zarya to put that shield on you, and there's going to be a better chance of surviving. That requires a lot of timing and a lot of experience, but it is possible. You want to do whatever you can to stay alive and to knock out people as much as possible. And just kind of be aware of where your snipers are, too, your enemy snipers, rather, because like we said earlier, she's pretty easy to hit when she's flying around. She's going to be even easier to hit when she's floating in one area while she's using her ultimate as well.
Yeah, enemy snipers are absolutely the worst. You want to either wait until they've just been taken out or until you're sure that you can get them with the rest of the group. Although with the new support sniper coming out, maybe that'll balance some of that, because they'll be able to shoot you with heals just as easily.
Yeah, consistently getting heals while you're using your ultimate, that would actually be good. Coincidentally, it happens to be her mom that's the support sniper, so think what you will of that. So let's talk more advanced strategy with Pharah. When you're playing her, Jeff, what kind of characters are you trying to hunt down? Who are you trying to avoid? I know that we mentioned the snipers earlier, but when you're attacking, what's usually your first target? Are you going for attack characters, support? Are you going for the tanks? What's your strategy?
Well, I think Pharah's number one job usually is to take out, I guess, the turrets. So like Torbjorn and his turret, just because she can get him pretty much easier than everyone else. You know that they're not going to be moving, so the difficulty of tracking for direct hits is not in play. Same thing with Bastion, but Bastion can usually return fire and dish it out just as easily as Pharah can, so that can kind of go either way. If you get the jump on him, though, she's really good against Bastion for the same reason. Reaper doesn't really have the range to combat Pharah if she's in the air, so you got to be careful, because when you land, he's usually waiting for you, but as long as you can stay airborne, he's not much of a threat. Mei, for kind of the same reason. I mean, the icicles are, if you lose to Mei one-on-one and you're firing rockets down on her and she takes you out with icicles, just give props to Mei, because she deserves it. And then, really, I think Pharah's probably the hard counter to Junkrat, just because there's almost nothing Junkrat can do to get back at Pharah when she's in the air. I mean, she's doing her full damage potential from above, and Junkrat is just firing these grenades with these terrible falling trajectories, and the best he can hope to do is get you with his concussion mine when you drop low enough, but at that point, Junkrat should already be dead, so I'd say that she's definitely the counter to him. As far as characters that give Pharah a hard time, Roadhog, because of his hook, is definitely a problem. Widow is, I would say, the number one counter. She's not played quite as often anymore since she got that nerf, but still a headshot will do the job, and there's nowhere to hide. I mean, when you're airborne, there's nowhere to take cover. So Widow's definitely a headache for Pharah. And then McCree and Soldier, for the same reason. I mean, they don't burst quite as hard as Widow, although McCree will soon, I guess. But, McCree and Soldier, just because they're hit scan, they're going to be able to put damage on Pharah instantly. They don't have to worry about tracking her, and at the very least force you out of the air, if not take you out. Those last two will need a little bit more time to finish the job.
Yeah, I think I agree. Those are great tips for trying to avoid getting taken down. She is so easy to take down if you're not careful with her, guys. So for me, I really, really enjoy. I'm generally switching to Pharah when there's turrets all the time. So Torbjorn, Bastion, anybody who likes to just kind of sit there and do a lot of damage from a stationary position, Pharah is just going to wipe the floor with them. She can do so much damage. They're direct hits, so you're just taking them out like they're nothing. You're going to have a lot trickier time facing some of your more mobile characters like your Tracer. Reaper can kind of see the rockets coming if you do them directly, so he can kind of wraith form out of there as well. But it's a very interesting game, guys. You can really... There are counters to a lot of the characters, just natural with their abilities, but you can really kill anyone with almost anyone. So it's just really a matter of mastering their abilities to the best you can. And with Pharah, it's all about just getting those direct hits. I can't stress that enough. Making sure that you land those rockets right in their face. 120 damage is something to be afraid of regardless of who you are, especially when getting them consecutively.
Yeah, it's important to mention, just because a character is a counter, that doesn't mean they can't kill the other one. Like when I'm playing Junkrat, I'm the bold Junkrat that thinks he's the 1% that's going to take Pharah out. Like I've got this trajectory down. I'm going to land a couple direct hits, no problem. And most of the time you get yourself killed doing that. But it's not like you just need to go and switch characters. So just something to be aware of to play to your strengths. So as far as any tips, tricks, have you picked anything up playing Pharah that we haven't covered that you would want to mention here?
I think just in general, it's going to be key to know your maps with Pharah. I kind of briefly mentioned it earlier, but some of your more open air maps like Route 66 and Nepal really take some time to jump in those maps. Sometimes what I like to do is I like to go into a custom game and just run around with a character. Pharah is one of those characters that is going to be able to reach almost any point on the map and reach it quickly. So, using her jump pack and her hover together, you can get to a lot of great perches. You can kind of maybe discover areas of the map that you may not have playing Roadhog or even a Reaper, someone who's a little less mobile. So really explore the map, know where the best places are going to be to avoid that return fire. And the biggest thing with her is if you're in a small area, be super aware, get ready to pop that concussion blast if someone flanks you or surprises you, because close range is not good for Pharah unless you can get direct hits on people and not damage yourself at the same time.
Yeah, that's a good point about the maps. Getting creative and exploring them is really important. I mean, you can kind of cheat a little bit if you want to jump on YouTube. I'm sure there's some videos showing some of the cooler Pharah tricks that people have already discovered, and I'm sure there are others that people will continue to discover as the game's out longer. Like one of my favorites, just right off the beginning of the map, if you're playing Route 66 on attack, you can go out the right side and just jump right off the edge of the cliff, hover around the side, concussive blast yourself, and then fly up, and you come up basically behind that little overpass where the defending team always sets up. So it's a great way to get the jump on their back line. You can usually take out their Widow or their Torbjorn before they even know it hit them because they're looking straight ahead. So just little tricks like that. I mean, that's just one example. But another thing I picked up, I mentioned that oftentimes you're going to find yourself in a one-on-one aerial duel with another Pharah. And that can be tricky because you need to land direct hits. Do not do the other Pharah a huge favor and drift into a wall, because at that point they can miss and land splash damage on you. So drifting into walls is very, very bad when you're fighting in the air as Pharah. If you do, you can use your concussion blast to push yourself off the wall and still stay airborne. So be aware of that. Walls are very bad. And we mentioned trying to be tricky with her ult. I really like to use it oftentimes, like as soon as I hit my flight button or my jump button, like before I even got into the maximum height, I'll just hop up like 10 or 15 feet and use it really quickly, just over a wall or something like that. So just get creative with it to try and capitalize on tense situations, especially. I find that people seem to get tunnel vision about objectives, so like at the end of a match or when people are making a push, that's usually the best time they're going to group up and forget to look up because they're looking straight ahead of the objective. So just try and take advantage of the situation. The last thing, you can actually hold down her jump button when it's still on cooldown. Like if you use it once, you let go and then just start holding the button down before it's ready. And then it'll actually fire off the instant it's available. It actually feels like it goes off a little bit earlier, like maybe a quarter second before the cooldown's up, where it'll just launch you up again. So, I mean, if you know I'm in a bad spot, I'm going to need to fly up as soon as I can, you can just hold the button down ahead of time. You don't have to wait for it to come off cooldown and refresh the button on your UI and then hit it.
Yeah, guys, these little tips and tricks, they're really going to come in handy when using Pharah. Flying is a lot of fun, but it does take some skill. And if you can master it and if you can get good at her mobility and at tracking enemies with your rocket launcher, you are going to do some major damage to the enemy team, and they're going to probably start prioritizing you. So just remember to mix up the air and ground tactics and use Pharah to the best of your ability. That's Pharah. She is the quintessential rocket launcher character of Overwatch. Jetpack, concussion blast, so many great abilities. The security chief from Giza, Egypt. Get out there, try her out, let us know what you think, and just get out there and fly like an Egyptian. You see what I did there? Fly like an Egyptian.
Wow.
Why are you so angry?
So this next Overwatch character is in the support role of Overwatch. It is Lucio. Lucio is probably one of the most unique characters in Overwatch. Actually, one of the most unique characters I've ever seen in an FPS in general, because he can be played many, many different ways. So Lucio is a Brazilian DJ who can fight by kind of skating around, wall running, and he has a set of tools that are all based around music, on audio, and he is a mix of healing, mobility, and attacking. Really interesting character.
Yeah, Lucio is a really fun character to play. I really love the vibe and the feel of the character. He's one of these characters where if I'm having a bad run of games with my usual characters, Lucio is a go-to for sure. He always seems to pick your mood up, if nothing else, because you've got a constant beat when you're playing. But, I mean, he's one of the highest-picked characters in high-end competitive play, too. So you can never really go wrong. He's super effective in every situation. And, you know, there's some Lucio players out there that are just insanely good at maximizing his abilities. When you put it all together, he is the total package. I mean, he can do everything.
So this Freedom Fighter is a very mobile character. He has a passive ability called Wall Ride. With the Wall Ride, Lucio can actually skate along walls for a brief amount of time. All you have to do is hold that jump button when you touch the wall, and you'll stick right on it. It seems simple, but it actually requires a little bit of skill. And in some cases, depending on what you want to get done, a whole hell of a lot of skill. But when utilized correctly, you can use it for evasiveness. You can use it to sneak up and flank certain characters. The wall ride is just one of those things where it's a type of mobility no other character has, and you can get really, really creative with it.
Yeah, Lucio is a funny character because I think he's more of like a hands-off support. He heals without trying to heal, so he's great for new players or as a second support that can help with damage and speed boost, but he also has some abilities, like the wall ride, that make him an extremely high skill ceiling character, so he's kind of unique in that I think he's a high ceiling and high floor character. I mean, I think he's great to start with, and even better once you really get the hang of him. The wall ride is really cool to have as a passive ability. It'll feel familiar to some Titanfall players, but it can make Lucio very, very hard to kill. I mean, if you're fighting a good one, you know, I'm sure a lot of us have seen them in game where you're fighting and then everyone remembers to look up at the same time, and there's a Lucio up there, and no wonder we weren't capturing the point. So they can be a real pain, and I mean, you can use it in a number of offensive and defensive ways. I mean, there's a lot of highlights out there about people wall riding and then getting a 4-player environmental kill where they just knock the whole team off. You just got to kind of get some practice with it, but once you get the hang of it, it is really, really effective.
Yeah, Lucio can get some infuriating combos off if you're not paying attention to him, especially with that wall ride. But it's not going to be really used to its greatest potential if not combined with some of his other tools. So let's talk about his main weapon for a second. His main weapon is the sonic amplifier. This gun is sort of a gun mixed with a speaker. It's actually going into a little bit of the Overwatch lore. It was technology stolen from the Vishkar company, which is the company that employs Symmetra. So it's kind of rumored that Lucio and Symmetra are somewhat rivals. They're not exactly on the same page. And this is technology that he stole from them. So he took it, and then being a DJ and being Lucio, he modified it into this really cool music sound-based speaker-type gun called the Sonic Amplifier. The primary fire of this gun has 20 ammo. It shoots in 4-round bursts per second with a slight pause in between the burst, and it does 16 damage per each projectile. So you can do a total of 64 damage if all 4 of the projectiles in a single burst can connect. Nothing to do backflips over. He's not really going to be your super damaging character, but it's enough for you to be able to harass teams because it actually does not have any fall off damage, and it will go straight across the level. It doesn't dip down or anything like that. The only caveat to it is that it is a pretty slow projectile. Not as slow as Symmetra's alternate fire, but it probably moves at more of a medium speed, but it's pretty easy to dodge at a long distance. So it's something you're using more to harass and to keep people out of an area that you don't want them occupying.
Yeah, harass is a good word to describe this weapon. I mean, it's fairly weak in terms of raw damage, as you said. But the fact that he can fire constantly because he, is healing without having to worry about targeting his heals, it makes it so that he can just really play the role of a disruptor. Like when you're getting ready to push and you're moving in slowly, he should just be firing constantly. And the shots themselves have a pretty large hit radius, so you can kind of fire them in a cone and make it hard for opponents to avoid at least some of the damage, just to wear them down a little bit beforehand. You're not going to burst anyone down with Lucio, but you can certainly contribute in a large firefight and beforehand or on your own, just kind of play the role as a disruptor.
For sure, and that doesn't mean you can't kill anyone either. If there's people that are not paying attention to you when you're playing as Lucio, especially your tanks, which are easier to hit, you can stack on that damage hit after hit and eventually get some kills if they're not paying attention. And if they do start paying attention to you, then you can use Lucio's amazing mobility to get out of there. So pretty good option there. But the cool thing about this gun is that that's just the primary fire. It does have an alternate fire as well that is useful in a completely different way. So the alternate fire to the sonic amplifier is called sound wave. Now, this sound wave is basically a large blast that happens directly in front of you, so very, very short range. You have to be pretty much right up on them. But it's a one-time blast. It does 25 damage, and it has a cooldown of 4 seconds. And basically what this thing does is it doesn't do a whole lot of damage, but it pushes whatever enemy characters are in front of you directly away from you. So it's similar to the concussive blast from Pharah, the concussive mine from Junkrat. This is a move that will push people away from you. And once again, you combine that with Lucio's kit, and you have a character that can wall ride around and just push people right off cliffs with very little effort.
Yeah, Soundwave is a really useful move. The damage is nice, but you're really not using this move to do damage. The knockback is in a cone in front of him, and that is the purpose of the move. I mean, it's on a 4-second cooldown, so you can really use this often to keep your opponents at distance. It's also fantastic for knocking enemies off ledges or into pits, but really it should be used most of the time just to keep Lucio at safe distance. I mean, between that and his speed boost that we're about to talk about, he can be a real pain to track down because he's just always outrunning you and always pushing you away.
For sure. And with a cooldown of 4 seconds, you can use it pretty often. So Jeff is absolutely right. Even though you can use it offensively, using it to kind of keep those close range attackers like your Reaper, your Tracer, your Roadhogs away is going to be key, because Lucio is not a tank by any means. So you want to make sure that you're doing everything you can to keep people off of you. And Soundwave is the perfect way to do that. Also, it uses 4 ammo per shot. So even though you do have to wait 4 seconds, you'll still have plenty of ammo left with a max of 20 ammo in the gun to be able to attack and mix up with it. So it doesn't use up a whole lot of ammo. It has a pretty short cooldown, so definitely a great move. You had mentioned the speed boost. I am really excited to talk about his next ability, because it's really complicated. Not complicated in that it's like tough to understand or use, but there's a sort of balance that you have to achieve when playing Lucio, and it all centers around being hyper aware of the situation around you. Lucio's really, his main ability here is the crossfade. So crossfade is an ability that basically allows Lucio to be in one of 2 general modes. So here's what I mean by that. If you're in the healing mode, then what happens is you hit that crossfade button, you're in healing mode, and you start healing the allies in an area of effect around you. If you go into his other mode, which is his speed mode, then you will actually increase the movement speed of your allies. So you can switch between any of these 2 modes at any point by just hitting that crossfade ability. It's unlimited. It doesn't run out. It doesn't have a cooldown. It's literally just an ongoing subtle effect in the background. So let's get into details. When you're in healing mode with crossfade, you can heal 12 HP per second for all allies around you. The trick is that you have to make sure that they are within line of sight. What this means is that you don't actually have to be looking at them. They don't have to be looking at you. But the characters can't be obstructed by anything. You actually have to be in a position where you could see each other if you wanted to. And you have to be decently close. You don't have to be way too close to Lucio, but if you're in this pretty wide area, you are getting heals consistently, and he is healing multiple characters at the same time, and it's just happening while you're moving around and while you're fighting. So this is a really, really cool ability, because you can be a healer without even having to really focus on it. All you have to do is just make sure that you're close to your team, which you should be anyways. The same effect works on the speed mode, except instead of healing, as you'd expect, everybody moves a lot faster. So there's a lot of different ways to utilize these 2 modes in Crossfade, and it makes for a very interesting support character.
Crossfade is a really cool and unique mechanic when you talk about it being bundled with these auras and the way that you have to kind of actively go back and forth. It's really neat that they put this in. I will say it takes some practice to get to the point where you can manage it without actively having to think about it. So he's definitely a character you want to put some time into and get comfortable with. But yeah, I mean, the healing aura is great for certain team comps where you have like a Pharah, Genji, and Tracer, and they're all spread out. Mercy is going to have a hell of a time chasing all these people down to heal them. So either she's not going to try and your attackers are going to die, or Mercy's going to get to one of them and probably get herself killed. Lucio is ideal for that type of team comp. As far as the speed aura, it's very useful in a number of situations. I mean, it helps you get back to the fight faster when you die, and it helps your allies as well with that boost. But also with like coordinating pushes for objectives and things like that, you see it utilized a lot more in high-end play for that type of reason. I think people don't use it a ton and don't use it in a super effective manner in quick play usually. But it is a very powerful tool, especially when you start to get the hang of it and coordinate with your teammates. Yeah,
and coordination is really key for Lucio, because I will admit, when I first started playing Overwatch, I didn't really touch a lot of the support characters at first, so I kind of saw Lucio from the outside as I played a lot of tanks. So when you're playing Winston or Zarya or a lot of these other characters that outside of their abilities don't really have fast movement speed, being on a team with Lucio, especially a good Lucio, is amazing, because all of a sudden you start running faster, you're living longer, you're in the middle of a battle and you haven't died yet, and you're like, what the hell's going on? Oh, there's a Lucio nearby. I'm literally buffed just by being next to this guy. So it kind of adds to his personality of being super upbeat, very positive, all about helping the people around him, and he really does that in his mechanics as well. That healing, it's healing. It's going to be useful at any time, especially when you're getting attacked. And that movement speed, like you said, a little more high level. You want to kind of coordinate and communicate with your team because you can use it to get out of your enemy's ultimates. You can use it to get to certain areas a lot quicker, and there's just a whole bunch of possibilities. I don't even think that the potential of this ability and this character has been fully reached, although there are some great players out there. And that'll actually bring us up to his next ability, which is Amp It Up. And Amp It Up is directly connected to his crossfade ability. So the way Amp It Up works, it's actually a 3-second in duration boost of whatever crossfade mode you're on. So here's what I mean by that. If you are in your heal mode and you hit the Amp It Up, you trigger it, and for 3 seconds you are now healing more than you normally do. You can increase your heal to 40 per second for all allies around you. So that is a huge jump up. Basically, that's going to keep your team alive and for a full 3 seconds, and that's going to be something that's going to be really, really good to use when the enemy starts pushing, when you see everybody starts to go into critical. It's a great way to keep them alive, and it has a 12-second cooldown, so even though you can't spam it and use it over and over again, 12 seconds is a pretty decent amount of time to wait where you're fighting your way. If you keep your team alive and the fight's still going on, you can hit it again and heal them some more. It works the same way with the speed boost. He actually does scream speed boost from time to time when he uses it, which is hilarious because it kind of adds to the humor of his character. But when you hit the Amp It Up and you're in speed mode on the crossfade, your characters on your team will start flying across the level. And this move is key for capturing payloads or control points quicker than the other team. If you have a Lucio and they don't, you are just going to get to places faster.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Amp It Up is really effective. I think it's good to know that you don't have to stay in whichever aura you were in when you started it. You can switch back and forth, and whichever one is active is going to receive that boost for 3 seconds. So just because you were in speed mode and now you got hurt, you can swap it to healing and get back to full health and then swap it to speed if it's still up. So don't let it affect which mode you need to be in. On a 12-second cooldown, I think it's worth mentioning, a lot of times people will use it to speed boost in to use a coordinated push, but if you don't use it for that reason, it's often good to save it. People that use it right at the beginning, even when they don't need to, they're just kind of doing overhealing. And at that point, it wears off after 3 seconds, and then your allies start getting hurt, and you can't do anything more than your base aura to save them. So if you don't use it to get into the objective, I like to save it until you see some people start to get to like half health and then use it from there. But it's important to get comfortable with it, and it can be a real difference maker, especially with the speed boost, in terms of adding that extra mobility that makes your team just dominate the other team in a way that's hard to quantify.
Yeah, I will say, specifically for me, when I'm playing Zarya, it's really, really nice because she doesn't have many options like Winston does or Diva to get back. And she's a great tank. So having that speed boost to get back into a point and help out your team, that's the thing with Lucio. And a lot of your support characters, and Yada, Mercy, it's about being hyper aware of what's going on, not just with the enemies, but with your team. You can keep an eye on their life. You can see all of your teammates through the walls based on their color. It goes from green to yellow to red, so you can see how much life they have. There's a little critical icon that appears if they're dying. So Jeff makes a great point. If you're going to amp it up, make sure you're saving it for that moment that you really need. And there's not really a distinct right answer of when to use it. You just have to feel it out. You have to really be aware of your team's position, where everybody is, how much life they have, and just do your very best to use both your speed and your heal in conjunction with Amp It Up to keep your team alive, keep them moving, and you're going to be the backbone of mobility and of keeping your HP up. So that is going to be key with Lucio. And that's actually going to bring us to his ultimate ability, which is not quite obvious what it does right off the bat if you're not completely familiar with it. His ultimate is Sound Barrier. What Lucio does is he jumps in the air, he yells, "Let's break it down." And basically, once he touches the ground, this is the key part, it's when he touches the ground, not right when he jumps. He actually radiates a protective wave around all of his teammates that provides them with plus 500 shield immediately upon triggering it. So he hits the ground. Everybody within range, 360 around you, gets an additional 500 shield, and this lasts for 6 seconds. Now, that's a whole lot of HP, but it does have a catch. Every single second after you trigger it, you actually degrade 100 shield. So it's, even though you get 500, it's not a full 500 for the 6 seconds. It does go down 100 shield, 100 shield, every single second that passes by. However, this is a great move to use in a pinch, and it'll completely save your team if timed correctly.
Sound Barrier is fantastic for either pushing objectives or saving multiple critical teammates. I personally love to use it as basically as a counter ultimate. So if you time it right, you can pretty much counter any damage dealing ultimate, except maybe like Diva, I think will burn through it. But for the most part, you know, you see Pharah go airborne and you can always hear these audio cues, you know, for Justice Reigns from Above or Reaper's Death Blossom or McCree's High Noon. It's always going to give you that split second where if you're getting into a big encounter and you're waiting for someone to use their ultimate, I like to save it, and then as soon as I hear that audio cue, I'm ready to go, and you can usually save the whole team.
Absolutely. And also important to note, as I mentioned before, the sound barrier only activates once Lucio touches the ground. So if you have pretty good timing and aim and you're playing someone with those pushback abilities like the Pharah's Concussive Blast, the Concussive Mine with Junkrat, or maybe even another Lucio using that sound wave, if he triggers his sound barrier while you're near an edge, you can push him off a cliff as he's activating it. And if he doesn't touch the ground, it's not going to happen. And that's going to lead to a very angry Lucio and most likely a very dead enemy team.
That's a good point, because a lot of times you see these Lucios that are wall running to the top of the map or the top of the building that you're in, and then you hear them ult, but it doesn't go off for a while because they're so high. So just be aware of that. You can shoot them out of the air and prevent the ultimate, but yeah, once they hit the ground, usually best to back off and give them a few seconds to let the shield cool off.
So let's talk more advanced strategy with Lucio. I think more so than almost any other character, Lucio really comes into play when you're talking about team comp. And so team comp, that's kind of the slang used for your team composition. It's what everybody chooses, how you want to balance it out, how many support characters, defense, attack, tanks. And Lucio is actually a great choice in almost any team comp, but I feel there's a lot of different options of him, you know, going main healer versus support healer, how the player plays Lucio. So there's a lot of different strategies here. What are some ways that you've used Lucio to maximize your team's lifespan?
Yeah, Lucio is a funny character. I mean, I really like to play him not necessarily as the second healer, but as a pair, like with another healer. So either a double Lucio or Lucio Mercy. And that could be helpful, first of all, just because even though he puts out a lot of aura healing, he is somewhat limited in terms of his burst healing. But also because if you're running double Lucio, you can usually run a heal and a speed boost. So it really stacks well. But, I mean, as far as, you know, I know we like to do like a strong against, weak against section where we talk about how characters fare against others. I would say that Lucio really helps himself and the team against characters like Mei, Winston, and Reaper that need to be up close. Between his speed aura and his knockback, he can really give those characters fits. And then another one, and I don't know for sure that this is like a hard counter set in stone, but I personally think that Lucio can give Widowmakers fits. He's definitely the hardest support for a Widowmaker to hit, but also just in terms of being able to speed boost and the whole team pushes, in a Widow that normally would have maybe had a chance to get 4 or 5 shots off got 1 or 2. So I think he can make Widow's life hell. As far as like who I would say he's weak against or who gives him trouble, not that many people. I mean, again, you're not really playing him in like an active one-on-one role where you're seeking out other classes, but as part of a team comp, he's always a good choice. I guess you could say Pharah would give him a lot of problems just because he's not usually going to be in a position to push her back, or even if he does, it doesn't really affect Farah's ability to put out damage. But again, it's really more about playing him I would say with Lucio, it's really more about who you're playing with and how you're playing as opposed to who you're playing against. What do you think? How do you like to play him?
No, I think you're completely right. When Lucio's one of those characters that I don't really, you look at more of the attack and defense characters, your Widows, your Tracer, a lot of your tanks, and you immediately think, oh, who can I beat and who should I avoid? Lucio is really team-based. It's all about sticking with your team regardless of who you're fighting. Generally, and everybody can play differently. You can be a more aggressive Lucio. I myself am not. I definitely lean more towards his support abilities while using attack as sort of a fallback, a way to kind of keep people away and use those harassment techniques we were talking about before and kind of hitting people from a distance. But all in all, I really think that for me, when I'm using Lucio, it's about using that speed to kind of get away from characters that are trying to catch up to you, because a good team will go after the healer, and it's arguable that Lucio is the hardest healer to catch, especially when played correctly. So I think it's really a matter of attacking anybody who's in range at any point and really being an opportunistic person and trying to knock people off cliffs when there's an opportunity, using your wall run. Like we said before, he's a very high ceiling skill character. There's a lot of opportunities with him, but it's also very easy to screw up with him as well if you don't time things correctly, if you're not platforming as you should. So it really is going to come down to, maintaining balance with Lucio and just being hyper aware of what's going on around you. A few other tips and tricks with Lucio. One of the big things with him, if you look at the reticle on the screen, you can kind of have a small visual marker letting you know a few things that are going on. The crossfader is always right below your reticle. So there is a green arrow marker to the right. That means that you are in speed mode. And there is a sort of medical cross that is yellow to the left, and that means that you're in healing mode. So that's kind of a quick glance instead of, having to look anywhere else. It's right there. You always know what mode you're in. And then also there's a number in the center, and keep an eye on that number, even though you're not consistently, your whole team's going to be surrounding you. So you're not going to always have everybody in sight. So it's going to be tough to kind of know where they are and know who to heal. But if you look at the number in the middle, whether you're in speed mode or heal mode, there's actually a number that'll show you how many people you're affecting. So that's one of those little things where you can kind of use your peripherals and kind of know, oh, I see I'm only healing 2 people, but I know that I have 4 teammates around. So you can kind of shift yourself around and keep glancing down at that number and just making sure you're hitting as many people as possible. Keep an eye on their health, the crits, things like that. And the biggest thing, which I always go back to, especially with Lucio, though, is sound design. Blizzard uses sound design in this game quite a bit, not only for cool effects and Easter eggs and things like that, but it's also used for balancing mechanics. And Lucio is no exception. In fact, he's probably one of the most sound-heavy characters out of anyone, which is not a surprise, him being a DJ. So your healing mode and your speed mode actually have 2 different songs that play. They're actual songs that kind of loop over and over, your kind of EDM-style DJ songs. And you can, as a person that's not necessarily playing Lucio, but that's near him, kind of use that as a cue, get familiar with what those songs are, and you'll know if he's hitting you with speed, if he's healing you. The healing's a little more obvious with the stuff that appears on your HUD and that little yellow healing boost thing. But it's just little things like that that are really going to help out and keep you subtly aware of what's going on without drawing too much of your attention away from who you're fighting or what your objective is.
Yeah, that's a good point. And with regards to the sound design, I think we may have mentioned in one of our first episodes, but Lucio's gun actually makes a different sound as you get lower on ammo, too, which is just a cool little... I mean, I don't think most people rely on the sound the gun's making to know when they're low on ammo, but if you want to, you can do it with Lucio. It's just a pretty cool little thing that's in the game. Another thing I picked up, there's actually a setting that defaults the aura to always be on heal, and then so when you hold down the crossfade button, it swaps it to speed, and when you let off the button, it swaps it back to heal automatically. I think this can be a pretty useful setting, especially for newer Lucio players who don't want to accidentally forget to heal their allies. You know, it's something that you have to get comfortable managing, so I think it's usually safer to default it to heal mode, and then when you think about it, you can speed boost them. But I would say as you get a little bit better and more comfortable with Lucio, you'll probably want to turn that setting off, because I think the better and better you get with Lucio, the more time you're really spending in speed mode as opposed to only healing, when you need it. Another thing, just in general, you want to be mindful of overhealing. If no one needs healing, the best way to help the team is with the speed boost. So as you get more comfortable, just manage that, and I think lean more towards the speed boost unless the healing is really necessary.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I will say it is a little frustrating when you're in a team and you have a Lucio and, you're in the midst of a fight and all of a sudden you're like, why am I dying? And you look at him and he's giving everybody a speed boost. Honest mistake. I know I've made it when I first started playing him, but it's one of those things where you want to utilize your abilities the best you can. So if your team's dying and you're not healing, then you're not doing your job as Lucio. So yeah, that's a great point. Check out those character-specific options in the controls for all of the characters. Actually have customizations you can make. Whether it be reticle color or certain abilities, settings, watching the HP meters of your allies. Really, really interesting stuff, and it can really help you squeeze the best you can out of a character, and it's all a matter of preference. So that was a character breakdown of Lucio, the Brazilian DJ. Definitely give him a try. He's one of the more interesting support characters in Overwatch. And if you're not one of those people who like to be an active healer and that's your main goal of sticking on someone like Mercy does, he might be a good choice for you because he can heal without even really having to think about it. It's just making sure that you're in that mode. So try him out. Let us know what you think. A lot of different ways you can play him. If you have any strategies that we haven't mentioned, then definitely let us know. Thank you guys so much again for listening to this episode of the podcast. We really enjoyed talking about these two characters. They are both just a blast to play. And if there's anything else that you would like to add, if you have any feedback, any other tips or strategies, or maybe topics you'd like us to talk about, let us know. There's a few different ways of reaching us. You could reach us on Twitter. I am at HappyJamOP. And Jeff?
I'm at TruthiterOP.
You can also reach me directly by email if you're more comfortable with that. It is happyjamop@gmail.com. Check out our website, oppodcast.com. We usually have our newest episodes. You can check out some of the older episodes as well. We are on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. And thank you all so much for listening. Definitely catch us next week with some more of our character breakdowns. We look forward to talking to you next time, and we'll see you soon.